The high-octane world of competitive auto racing has not featured many women throughout the years, though there have been some notable exceptions. And one of those exceptions is the first woman to race in Formula One, the most popular motorsport in the world. Born of Italian nobility, in the mid-20th century she became a pioneer in a sport that even to this day has seen just 5 female drivers over its long and illustrious history. But the love for speed knows no genders. Just ask the incomparable Maria Teresa de Filippis. Her early years. When I previously said that she was born into Italian nobility, I was seriously not kidding. On November 11, 1926, she became the youngest of 5 children for the Italian Count Sereno Francesco de Filippis and his wife, a Spanish noblewoman. The blood was incredibly blue in this family, to say the least. She grew up in the Palazzo Marigliano in central Naples, which is about as far from a racetrack as you can imagine. From a relatively young age, she had displayed an interest in sports, most commonly things like horseback riding and tennis, the usual sports you'd associate with the aristocracy. But this interest and passion for athletics very dramatically veered towards the more extreme ends of the spectrum. In the 1940s, after the conclusion of the Second World War, and now in her early 20s, she first developed a taste for auto racing. That said, nearly everyone tried to talk her out of it, either through gentle coaxing or overt prodding, including from 2 of her brothers who made bets on how slow she would go. But she would not be dissuaded, and at the age of 22, she made her racing debut. Her career begins. Driving a Fiat 500, she actually won her very first race shortly after beginning her competitive career. It was just a 10-kilometer or 6-mile race, not exactly a marathon distance, but it was a start, and it put a W on the board for her. And it was important because it gave her the confidence to keep going, despite being effectively the lone woman in an extremely patriarchal sport. This early success led her to compete in the Italian Sports Car Championship, where she eventually finished second in the 1954 season. Seeing this obvious potential, regardless of gender, Maserati brought her onto the team as a works driver, meaning that she would be folded in as a driver for Maserati, who served as the manufacturer. In the following years, as she looked to gain more experience and build her reputation, she competed in a pretty wide variety of events and motor races, including endurance events and hill climbing, where she drove a Urania BMW in the 1949 Stella Alpina event. In a curious event, she was disqualified after the finish of the 1950 Giro di Sicilia, as the organizers claimed that she had been push-started. As the story goes, before the start, she had rolled up and stopped a few inches short of the line, so her mechanic had pushed her into position. The disqualification was ludicrous to all involved. Her compatriot, fellow driver Tazio Nuvolari, was quoted as saying, "You made a girl drive over 1,000 kilometers on wet roads only to then disqualify her." Yeah, that sucks. But she would not be held back, and eventually she finished second in a sports car race supporting the 1956 Naples Grand Prix, driving a Maserati 200S. At 5 feet 2 inches tall, she was so small that her Maserati had to be adapted with special padding so that she could reach the pedals. But finally, the momentum was building, so much so by this time she was known by her nickname Diavola, which translates as she-devil in Italian. What a great nickname. And this momentum continued right up until 2 years later in 1958, when the Formula One bell finally rang for Maria Teresa de Filippis. Her Formula One career. Although Maserati was a successful Formula One chassis manufacturer in the 1950s, by 1958 they had actually withdrawn from the sport. However, all of the cars remained available to private groups and individuals who may want to race. This is how, on May 18, 1958, she was given the opportunity to enter the Monaco Grand Prix, the second round of the 1958 Formula One season, in one of those 250Fs that Maserati had made available for private use. Unfortunately, she, along with about half of the 31 entrants, did not post a good enough time to qualify, but the flame was lit. The historic opportunity finally came at the 1958 Belgian Grand Prix, which allowed all drivers to compete with no cutoff time for qualifying. De Filippis qualified in 19th place, nearly 34 seconds off of Tony Brooks's pole position time and only ahead of a single driver who had mechanical problems during qualifying. Although she was lapped twice in the 24-lap race, she did manage to finish in 10th place, though it should be said that this was last place as 9 other cars had crashed or otherwise couldn't finish. But while she had officially broken through as the first woman to finish a Formula One race, the prejudice was just getting started. At the French Grand Prix later that year, she was barred from entering the race. In a 2006 interview, she claimed that the race director was pretty blunt by saying, quote, "The only helmet a woman should wear is the one at the hairdresser's," end quote. Yikes. The 1958 Portuguese Grand Prix in August gave her another start in Formula One, but her race lasted only 6 laps before her engine failed and she was forced to withdraw. A month later, she started her home Grand Prix. This went a little bit better, but just 13 laps short of the finish line, her engine again died on her. Her 1958 season, full of such promise and trailbreaking, ended with a sad whimper. For the 1959 season, she joined the Barra Porsche RSK team. The team bore the name of Jean Barra, a French race car driver and a good friend of hers. She entered the Monaco Grand Prix but failed to qualify, her time being 3 seconds off the lowest qualifying pace. In the end, this turned out to be her final attempt at Grand Prix qualification, because just a few short months later, her good friend Barra was killed in a crash at the German Grand Prix. Devastated by his death and now more than ever hyper aware of the risks that she faced, she left the circuit and retired from professional racing forever, at least from the driving. More on that to come. Her post-driving career. At the time of her retirement from Formula One driving, she was just in her early 30s, and in 1960, while on a ski holiday, she met an Austrian textile chemist named Theodor Huschek. They married 6 months later and they had a daughter, Carola. She stayed completely away from everything to do with motorsports for nearly 2 decades, focusing on her family and life away from the hustle and bustle of racing. But hot, filthy, dirty speed doesn't just wash out of your veins, and while her driving days were over, she still had much to give to the sport she loved and changed so fundamentally. In 1979, she joined the International Club of Former F1 Grand Prix Drivers, and later on in 1997, she became its vice president. She was also a founding member of the Maserati Club in 2004 and went on to become its chairperson, a fitting position for someone with such a storied history with Maserati. She died not all that long ago in January 2016 at the age of 89 after a long illness, nearly 60 years after her incredible Formula One debut. Her legacy. Though her driving career was extremely brief, Maria Teresa de Filippis is firmly established as a pioneer. She broke down substantial cultural and societal barriers in becoming the first female Formula One driver, and not only was she the first, but she was also one of the only ones. Only 4 other female drivers have even entered to qualify for a Formula One Grand Prix race officially, but she broke through so that others at least had a chance. And in fact, nearly 20 years after her first race, the most successful female F1 driver of all time, fellow Italian Leila Lombardi, became just the second woman to start a Grand Prix race. Lombardi actually ended up starting 12 Grand Prix races from 1974 to 1976, and to this day is the only woman in history to earn points towards the Formula One World Championship. The last female driver in Formula One was also an Italian, Giovanna Amati, who saw qualification in 3 races in 1992, though she never got to start a Grand Prix. So while the list of female Formula One drivers is a short one, it's a list that will always begin with Maria Teresa de Filippis. In the end, her brothers ended up losing their bets on how slow she'd go, and thank goodness for that. Thanks for watching today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and otherwise, I will be back soon with some more sports fun. Until next time, friends, arrivederci.